India development debate right here on ET now. The huge disparities in devolution of the tax from centre to states have created a north versus south divide. Karnataka Chief Minister Siddaramaiah has joined forces with his counterpart in Andhra Pradesh, Mr. Naidu, to hit out at the centre for disproportionate allocation of funds to the southern states. In fact, Naidu, whose TDP recently walked out of the NDA, has accused the Modi government of stealing revenues from the southern states to fund development activities in the north. The bone of contention, of course, is the population-based calculation of funds instead of benchmarking each state's contribution to the overall kitty. For instance, Karnataka contributes almost 10% of the centre's tax kitty, but when it comes to revenue shares, it barely gets 5% thanks to the population-based formula, which has now been changed. The big slugfest between the centre and the states over funds is a huge topic of discussion right here on the India development debate tonight. I'm Supriya Srinath, and joining me on the show are Mr. Krishna Sagar Rao, spokesperson of the BJP, Mr. Gaurav Vallabh, spokesperson of the Congress, Shaibal Gupta, former member of 13th Finance Commission, Ruben Abraham, CEO and senior fellow IDFC Institute. So thanks each one of you for joining us. And it's only fair that I begin with the non-politicians on the show, and I will begin with experts. And Ruben Abraham, if I come to you, why do you believe leaders are suddenly crying foul? Because the Finance Commission's responsibility is to rationalize, to equalize development and finance as per the Constitution. Now, how far is the economic bone of contention here? Or is this war cry merely political?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think let's just keep the politics aside. Let's just keep the politics aside for a second.
Go ahead, Ruben.
Sorry, I was just saying.
Ahead,
let's just keep the politics aside. Sorry, there's some lag.
Okay, while we fix your audio. And I will request my director to do that very quickly. I will go to Mr. Gupta. And Mr. Gupta, what is your own take on this? Do you believe all this opposition and all this coming together of the southern states that we are seeing, is it economic or is it actually political?
It is both. But I would like to just take from what you have spoken, that the main idea of Finance Commission is equalization. Now, that equalization has not succeeded in the last 70 years. Now, if you go by any indicators, whether per capita plan or non-plan investment, Eastern region and Bihar especially got least. Now, when we talk about the historical disadvantage, most of the eastern states were part of the Bengal presidency. So, historically these states were laggard, or it was not developed during the British period. Even if you go by the per capita expenditure in health or education or home in the pre-independence period, the expenditure in Bombay and Madras presidency was higher than the Bengal presidency. To a great extent, the surplus from Bengal presidency subsidized the development of Bengal and subsidized development of Bombay and Madras presidency. In the post-independence period, not only the per capita expenditure in plan and non-plan was less, the Freight Equalization Act, which was introduced way back in early 50s, that doomed most of the states of the eastern India, Bengal, Bihar. At that time Jharkhand was not there, it was part of Bihar.
Right.
And many states. So just one second. The Freight Equalization essentially subsidized the development of southern India, western India at the cost of eastern India. So, this is a high time that that debt should be returned by southern India by acknowledging that the population which has been taken for 2011 should be, there should not be any objection to that. I just wanted to one correction that I was not a member of the 13th Finance Commission.
So
I was member of the Raghuram Rajan Commission.
Sure. I'm sorry about that, sir. But I think it's an important point that you make. It's time to return the debt, and that's the approach of and that should be the approach of the southern states. But Ruben, I'm going to ask you, the 15th Finance Commission is being blamed for these unusual changes to the terms of reference. The reality is the terms of reference are passed by the cabinet. So it is a political call. And why are we denying that? This isn't an economic call to change the year of population to 2011. This is a very, very political call.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think we should just keep the politics aside for a second here and just address the fairness issue that sits at the heart of this particular problem, which is that on the one hand, I mean, the formula that they're basically using is that the weights that they're using is 27.5% of the 2011 census is the weight that they're going to use. So, and that could obviously lead to a certain, wealth transfer from the southern states to the northern states. Equally, on the demographic side, one of the things that we've got to note here is that there's been a demographic divergence as well. So the southern states have also performed much better on the demographic front. So therefore, they're very likely to get taxed on that front as well. So I think between the economic divergence and the demographic divergence, that's where the problem really sits. But the core issue here is one of fairness, which is, do you actually, on the one hand, how are you going to be fair to states that have actually performed well, both on the economic front as well as on the demographic front? And equally, how are you going to be fair to the larger states of the country, which actually have the larger population and so therefore should have a larger say? And that fairness question sits at the heart of this, to me, and I think, and that's very, very tricky to resolve. So I think what the Finance Commission is really doing is by bringing it down to, incrementally increasing it. So, the 14th Finance Commission used 10% as the weight. The 15th Finance Commission is going to use 27.5% as the weight. So I think they are basically trying in incremental steps to bring about a change. Now the question is, how do you address the fairness issue that sits at the heart of it? I think that's really the issue that we need to discuss, and not inject it with politics.
Right. But I wonder if you can divorce politics from anything that we discuss or anything that happens in this country, which is why let me take it across to the politicians. And Mr. Krishna Sagar Rao, you represent the BJP here. You also represent the southern interests. And I will ask you a very fair question. The South Indian states are complaining, and the obvious reasons that they're complaining on is that they receive more money as a share of the 14th Finance Commission against their share of population or even poverty. Now, let me just quickly quote some figures. In financial year 16, Bihar's devolution as percentage of taxes paid was over 400%. For Karnataka, it was just 33%. Do you believe it's a disincentive for states that have performed well, that have controlled population, that have done better on economic parameters? Or does the fact that there are northern states that have more mouths to feed, that are poor, and they can't be perennially backward, isn't that justified, Mr. Rao?
Supriya, at the outset, we have to understand that Finance Commission is driven. I have an echo. Please correct it. Can you please correct it?
Guys? Yes, sir. Go ahead. If you can hear,
I have an
hear
echo.
us clearly, you can go ahead, sir.
Yeah.
Is it better now?
See, Supriya, what I am trying to say is that the Finance Commission is, it's a little better now. No, I still have a huge echo.
Okay, I will go across to him and his echo is fixed. And Mr. Director, if you can please fix it very quickly, it will be very kind of you. But I will go across to the Congress spokesperson right now then. And Mr. Vallabh, while the southern states and this debate has really started with Karnataka Chief Minister Siddaramaiah, your own Chief Minister, talking about this, the reality also is that there are many more mouths to feed in the north. Yes, as a percent of devolution of taxes, it may be a lot higher for the northern states like a BR or a UP. But as a percentage of the population, also these states house more people. Those people are far poorer. Doesn't that argument cut ice with your chief minister down south?
See, Supriya, we have to take this question from two perspectives. There are two devolutions. One is vertical, another is horizontal. Vertical means how much is distributed between center and states, and horizontal means amongst the states. So, I will start with the vertical devolution. See, this Finance Commission, the 15th Finance Commission TOR, is anti-constitutional. Why I am saying like that? That they are saying in their vertical devolution TOR that they are not going to pay to the states for their revenue deficit, and which is around 1.3 lakh crore. And the 14th Finance Commission, which had increased the state share from 32 to 42, they are saying now the majority of them will be in a centrally sponsored schemes. So basically what this Finance Commission TOR is saying, that states are going to work on the centrally sponsored schemes. So there is nothing called as state schemes, state specific schemes. This is from the perspective of the first, that is vertical devolution. Now coming to horizontal devolution, Supriya, my basic premise, and as an economist I am saying like that when a state is having a better governance, and definitely governance can be measured, one of the way of measuring the governance is the population control, is that what is the replacement ratio. So when few states are having a better governance, and because of that better governance we can't penalize. Contrary to this view, there is a federal structure of our government where every state central has to take care of every state, and every person should get the benefit whomsoever is staying in our country. So I think we have to find out a proper balance between this. We have to work on a formula where the good governed state should be given more share rather than following a 71 or 2011 census, whatever it is, and the states which are poorly governed should not be given that share, and then central is there who can always help the poor governed states to come up to the level of the better governed states. That is what I want to convey as a reaction to your question.
Okay, as a reaction to my question, you've been able to convey there that there needs to be incentive for population control, and population control is a mark of better governance. Mr. Rao, I don't just want you to respond to that, but I also have a question.
Supriya, can you
when the southern states are talking about being incentivized, yes, can you hear me, Mr. Rao?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you now. Yeah.
Mr. Rao, can you hear me? Okay, great. So for states like UP, the transfer for every poor person is 14,310 rupees. Whereas for Kerala, it is over 50,000 rupees. There is obviously a case for economic equalization, is there not?
See, Supriya, let's get the basics, the fundamentals clear here. The Finance Commission is not new. This is the 66th year of the Finance Commission. This is the 15th Finance Commission. It will be operational from the April 1st, 2020 towards the next 5 years, to the next 5 years, that is 2025. And the mandate of the Finance Commission is very clear. What these politicians of especially the Congress and the regional parties are doing is purely the obfuscation politics and confusion of people for divisive political expediency. Nothing more, nothing less. Because I'll clearly explain you in just few points. The Finance Commission mandate is clear. The number one is to ensure high quality of public spending. Number two, to ensure cooperative federalism succeeds and strengthens. Number three, it ensures the financial stability and the fiscal discipline of the states. So now this is the mandate. Where is the population figuring in all this? What is the Finance Commission doing? Even if you look at 14th Finance Commission, 11 major recommendations, it is about how to keep your debt at 62% of the overall GDP, inclusive of states and the country. The 14th Finance Commission recommendation, key recommendations are only 9. In 9 of them, there is nothing to do with the population, because population has nothing to do with devolution. Whatever the state is earning as revenue through its taxes is proportionately given back by 42% from the central share. So if there is, let me just complete, Supriya. If there is a state which is performing, let's say Chennai is performing better, that means its tax collection is higher and proportionately it gets the tax back. What are we talking about? What are we talking about? Our taxes are being, migrated to northeast. This is all pure trash. It is purely to confuse people, because the minus 42%, whatever is the central share, out of the central share, the grant in aid or the national schemes or the subsidies are being given from the central share. It is not being given from by taking from the share of the states. States are getting tax devolution.
I get your point. No, I get your point. Mr. Rao, I get your point, but I think the problem with the southern states.
So the entire plot, Supriya, what I'm saying,
Rao, I get your point, but I think
it is important for everyone to understand the mandate of the Finance
Commission. Let me finish,
Commission.
sir. I know you made your point, but I will take over now. I think the larger point that you have made is in line with your party's position, but I think the southern states and what they're demanding really is that there needs to be more equitable resource allocation, and they also believe that they need to be incentivized for better governance. I mean, having a huge population is bad governance. It's not a great virtue,
if you
just to be the devil's advocate. But Reuben Abraham, I'm going to come to you, and if I may throw another figure, the per capita net state domestic product at factor cost for Bihar is 26,000 crore rupees. For UP, it's 38,000 crore rupees. But for Kerala, it's 1.15 lakh. For Karnataka, it's 1.24 lakh. Now, given those numbers, should we make our peace with the fact that there has to be cross-subsidization that southern states will have to do to maintain, so that we don't have pockets of India shining and dark holes amongst the other regions? Reuben.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's a fact that in most federal polities, you will see rich states to some extent cross-subsidizing poorer states. So I don't think that there's necessarily any issue with that. I think the problem becomes when, so let's ask the question of, where are some of these issues coming from? Some of these issues are coming from the fact that once you've actually gone for that redistribution, there is certainly a sense. So I think the sort of things that I certainly hear are when a certain part of the population then tries to impose language or impose food habits on the rest of the population. I think that is where the resentment actually is coming from, which is this whole idea that, we are already providing the cross subsidy, and then the majority population is telling us how to live our lives. I think it's that resentment is really where it's coming from. Now, the BJP spokesperson brought up the issue of competitive federalism. I'm a huge fan of the idea of competitive federalism, and I think the Prime Minister was spot on there. So I think this is where we need to revisit that, because the Constitution of India actually rarely mentions the word center. The Constitution of India actually talks about a union of states, and the union of states is a very different concept. So I think the sooner we move to that, what the founding fathers actually meant by the notion of a federation, I think the better off we'll be, with an implicit understanding that there will be cross-subsidization and the richer states will cross-subsidize the poorer states. I think the resentment and the fairness is really the issue that we need to talk about.
Yeah, I think you've completely hit the nail on its head, and that's exactly my next question to Mr. Rao. Before I go back to Mr. Gupta and Mr. Gaurav Vallabh. Mr. Rao, at the heart of this pushback, at the heart of this retaliation seems to be this majoritarian view, seems to be this view against Hindi majoritarianism, Hindi speaking, Hindustan, making Hindi the language to be spoken even at the United Nations. I think these are irritants that are adding to the discontent. Are you going to deny that? Mr. Rao.
It's so untrue because we first have to, it is so untrue because we have, this is just a figment of the imagination of the divisive forces in this country, because where is the force? I mean, did it start just 4 years ago, or it has been going on for the last 70 years? That's the first question. Number two is that we are a quasi-federal country. We are not a unitary country. We are not a federal country, as one of the respectable panelists saying, is it's union of states, but we are a quasi-federal state, meaning the central government controls the the entire union of India in terms of the fiscal and territorial integrity. It is unlike the federal structure of United States and unlike the unitary structure of UK. So we have to understand that. That's a fundamental. The third point which I wish to make is, as I said earlier, the Finance Commission is a constitutional commission. It is not a partisan body, nor it is a government body. It is a constitutional commission. It is with the 280 article, it has been initiated in 1951 by Dr. Ambedkar. So this is a constitutional body which makes recommendations. This doesn't deal with the political interferences in the parties or in the states, the language, the culture. This has nothing to do with that. This is purely a body which recommends the devolution, which recommends the good practices. So how is it? Now I'm only saying, how is it that it is doing anything unfair to states when it is recommending to a central government how to equitably distribute the central share of money, not even the state share, because state share is the devolution, which is automatically coming to the states.
That wasn't
so
my
there
question.
is zero unfairness in this entire thing.
Okay,
it's zero.
Mr. Rao.
Because the grant in aid, please let me complete, Supriya. What I'm saying
Rao.
is,
Mr. Rao,
the
my
grant
question,
in aid
no, Mr. Rao, I'm
and the
sorry, I'll have
scheme
to come in there.
support are the
My
only
question
two
really
factors
was, this is
which have financial
retaliation and a
implications.
backlash against the Hindi majoritarianism that India is seeing right now. And will you agree with me or disagree? You seem to disagree there. I'll go across to the Congress party. I'm really stretched for time on this show. And Mr. Gaurav Vallabh is at the heart of this debate, the real fear of delimitation of MP seats, of Lok Sabha seats, based on 2011 census, which will significantly reduce the representation of South and diminish their bargaining power. I mean, is that really at the heart of this fear, at the heart of this debate, and not so much economy? Let's be honest this evening. Mr. Gaurav Vallabh.
No, I'm going to respond very honestly, Supriya. See, if we are going to follow 2011 census, you know which all states are going to lose. There are 12 states who are going to lose, and which includes West Bengal, Odisha, and all South Indian states and Goa. So what they are trying to do? They are trying to just think that these are the states where their position is at very weak level. So they are just trying that we should deploy or we should transfer the funds to the states where we are relatively strong. And coming to your question, see, in 2001 when Mr. Vajpayee ji was the Prime Minister of our country, the same question regarding the Lok Sabha number of seats in the Lok Sabha came, he had safely continued with for 25 more years. Means till 2026 we are going to have the same Lok Sabha representation. So this is the same point which I would like to repeat what one expert mentioned. It is Hindi, Hindu, Hindustan. They are just trying to make a political agenda out of this economic TOR of the 15th Finance Commission, and deliberately this is designed in such a way that the states where their position is very weak or they are absent, they are going to get a maximum hit out of this.
All right, Gaurav Vallabh. Okay. All right, Gaurav Vallabh, I get your point there. Mr. Shaival Gupta, since you were a part of the committee that looked at states, do you believe there is fear in the states right now that if the next stage of what the Finance Commission would perhaps be looking at is delimitation of MP seats, of Lok Sabha seats, and the manner in which this has been done, it's an unusual change in terms of reference, and which is what is worrying southern states, that this will reduce their impact, their influence on policy making if this 2011 census were to be stretched to Lok Sabha seats as well.
No, I agree that incorporating 2011 census was a political decision. This was decided at the level of the cabinet. So, in some sense it was good that they wanted to bring the northern states or the Hindi heartland state or the eastern states on the center stage. But I would like to your contention that because of the population growth, the southern states will lose as far as Lok Sabha seats are concerned. I agree with that. But one thing I would like to mention, that when we are discussing this type of question, we cannot completely dismiss history. In the pre-independence period or in 50s or 60s or 70s, the northern states has cross-subsidized the development of southern India and western India. Now, these states, I mean northern states or eastern states are not developed, primarily because the per capita expenditure was much less. Even now it is less. Now, also historically these states never experienced some sort of a social movement. For example, in Kerala, there was a lot of historical factors which led to literacy, which led to control of the population, and you can see it in the southern states as well. Now, because of some historical reason, this transformation had escaped northern India or eastern India. So, it is a responsibility of union government that this should be changed. Now, Finance Commission is essentially meant to do some sort of a equalization. That is the mandate. That is why Finance Commission was constituted by Ambedkar. He was expert on provincial
Mr. Gupta,
finance.
I'm sorry, but I will have to.
So, this is a some sort of a step in that
Mr.
direction.
Gupta, we get your point. All right, it's a step in the direction, but Ruben Abraham, I'll give you a quick last word on this show. And, you know, while it's all very good to talk about economic equalization, to talk about how the more affluent need to support the less and the more impoverished states of India, the north states also need to pull up their socks. Is there a cap that's required on a formula like this?
Yeah. So, just to pick up on the point that the Congress spokesperson was, the former speaker was making, which is that one needs to account for history. Absolutely. And again, I don't think we should have any dispute about the cross-subsidization point. I think the key to remember is that in the 1960s and 1970s, the southern states were not trying to impose their language and culture on the northern states. I think that's the key differential here, and that's where, you know, the resentment issue comes in. I think the more sort of important thing to remember here, as colleagues of mine at the IDFC Institute have shown, is that, look, we have to take into account the reality of India, which is that the three largest big states in this country are growing 3 times faster than the three the three richest big states in the country are growing 3 times faster than the 3 poorest large states in the country. And that difference is actually, it's actually diverging further. So that's a point. Second, the average age of somebody in Bihar or of Bihar, the average age is 19, the average Tamilian is 30 or 31 years old. So when we make policy in this country, we need to actually account for these very stark differences that are beginning to emerge between states. And so, which is why a federal model is actually the right way to go. Now, obviously, our federation has a unitary bias. So my definite point here would be to get rid of that unitary bias and move to a much more deeper federation, which allows for some of these issues to actually resolve themselves. And to your final question about the formula, I do believe that, so I don't necessarily agree with the Congress spokesperson that you should not have any of this cross-subsidization whatsoever. I think the incremental move from 10% to 27.5% is probably a step in the right direction.
Okay,
and I believe that this can actually be solved formulaically. So somewhere between the 1971 census and 2011, we should be able to resolve it formulaically.
Okay. Right.
I had not said like that.
So there has to be a middle ground somewhere, but this is a heated discussion. This is not the South versus the North. There should never ever be a divide like this. But India can't be shining. I'm done with the show, sir. I'm sorry about that. India can't be shining in pockets and India can't be impoverished in certain dark holes. But there has to be incentive for good governance. and India will have to grow all together. That's really the big takeaway. Economic equalization, economic distribution, like our guests have pointed out, is at the key of this very debate. It cannot be imposed upon the South, and if the backlash is on account of Hindu majoritarianism, that needs to be reined in as well. But thank you very much for a wonderful panel, Mr. Rao, Mr. Vallabh, Mr. Gupta, and Mr. Abraham, for joining us right here on the India Development Debate. We take a quick breather and we're back with the big discussion and the heated debate of the day, the data wars between the Congress and the BJP.